Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in every single week. Or if this is your first time listening to the show, thanks for being here, because we established this show to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor to co-host this show every single week with Craig Brown. But he's not here this week. But you all know Craig. He is an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. But every now and then, I do a show where we go just into career development. And I usually don't have Craig along on those, although I probably should, because Craig's a lot of fun. But today is going to be one of those shows where we dive into a topic that's going to help you grow your career, be more successful, and help your companies do better at whatever it is that they do. So every week, I try and Craig tries to bring to this podcast interesting interviews and other ideas that are going to help all the listeners enhance and grow their careers. And today we have a friend of mine. We have David Horsager. Now, David's an interesting guy. David has been studying trust for 20 years, and he is one of the leading experts in the world on what it is to be a trusted leader. In fact, he has a brand new book that released, I think, last week. It releases tomorrow from the day we're recording this, but from the chance you get to listen, the book will be out just about a week, called Trusted Leader. We're going to talk a little bit about that book. So what David does is he develops trusted leaders in organizations through training, consulting, and certification. And he helps people solve the root problem to grow their careers and grow their businesses. And that root problem, it always goes back to trust. So David Horsager, welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast.
Wow, that is a big, important people right there. Hey, thanks for having me on. This is great, Thom. Appreciate it.
So David, let's first of all start with this new book, Trusted Leader. So this is not your first book. You had a best-selling book called The Trust Edge. When did the Trust Edge come out?
Trust Edge came out, originally 2008-ish, 2009, and then it got picked up by a big publisher on a big deal in 2011, and it came out again to the world. Daily Edge actually became a bestseller, I think 10 weeks on the Hudson list in airports and stuff too, but that was my core work originally. Trust Edge was it, and that's, the institute became named after that later on, Trust Edge Leadership Institute, and we're excited about Trusted Leader. It's different. I think it's just better even in a lot of ways. So
tell us about the premise of the new book.
New book, basically what you just said. Trust is the root issue. If we've learned anything, we put out one of the biggest studies annual on trust and leadership, at least out of North America, and it's just we keep finding trust is always the root issue. The number one question everybody's asking about you is not, do I like you? I've got friends I like a lot. I wouldn't go into business within a million years. It is, can I trust you? And so you want to develop your career, you want to grow, you want more opportunities. The question everybody's asking, whether it's your spouse, partner, or friend, whether it's a customer, client, employee, doesn't matter. The number one question is, can I trust you? And so trust being the root cause.
So the listeners of this podcast know that I talk a lot about the importance of relationships in business. We talk a lot about mentors. We talk a lot about networking and connecting inside and outside the companies. And I always go back to the old cliche that people do business with people they know, they like, and they trust. Now, when we think about those first two, we get to know people through a lot of different ways. And that has changed a lot in the last decade. The internet has changed everything. Now we seem to get to know people through likes, links, shares, and follows, which has sort of changed how relationships get built and found. Like is a little more subjective. I mean, I can't train you to like me per se. I can do things that are likable. But when it comes to trust, we can get down to the real root research and have a framework around what it is to be trusted. And you've created this framework. There are 8 pillars around the trust edge. So can you talk to us about what these 8 pillars are and why they would matter to somebody who, maybe has a technology engineering career? They're, growing, they're trying to grow the career ladder. Why do they even care about being trusted or working on that reputation piece around trust?
Sure. Let's start with the why then before we get to the how, because that matters. If you don't see the why, that's a big deal. Number one, I believe a lack of trust is your biggest expense as a leader, an organization, or a human. It's the biggest cost in your life. Trust is not a soft skill. It is the core issue. And you can think about it simply like, well, what do you mean trust costs? Well, think about a lock, right? A lock is a good example of a lack of trust, because the only reason I put a lock on anything is because I don't trust you. So what's the cost? Well, money. I got to buy the lock, pay for the lock. Second cost is time. Now I got to open it every time I go through the gate. And that's trust. Wherever you have a lack of trust, you can think about it with someone you write a text to someone you trust. How long does it take? Boop, it's done. Now write a text to someone you don't trust. Oh, it takes forever. Or you want to innovate as a team. If the team doesn't trust each other, they won't share ideas. They don't innovate. You want to follow a leader. The only reason you follow them or not is trust. You want to buy from a salesperson. The only reason you buy or not has something to do with trust. So you've got to get this why that trust. In fact, the research shows last year, the number one reason people want to work for an organization ahead of being paid more, being, having more autonomy or more fun work environment is trusted leadership. But it's the same at home or in relationships that if we catch that why, then we should get to the how, and that is critical.
All right, so let's get to the pillars. There's 8 of them, and I have found in my study of your work that they are all very interrelated. It's not like you can say, I'm going to do really good at the first pillar, and I'm going to score really high. Everyone's going to trust me. The other 7 can just go to heck. They all matter, and you have to work on all of them. But when you work on all of them and you can grow your scores in those areas, that's when the magic happens, right?
You know it, and you've talked about human connectedness for a long time, so you get this. But this is really important. They all do work together, and yet it's worth understanding this framework, because when you understand all 8, you actually are solving the real issue. And you'll see quickly why I don't believe it's ever an engagement issue or referral issue or a communication issue at the core. It's always one of these 8. So here they are, very briefly. The book has a whole lot more on this. We give a free webcast, whether or not you buy the book or not. We'll give you access to a free, deeper course if you'd like to know how to apply these. But here they are in brief overview. Number 1 is clarity. People trust the clear, and they mistrust or distrust the ambiguous or the overly complex. Number 2 is compassion. We trust those that care beyond themselves. We don't want to be accountable to people that don't care at all beyond themselves. Number 3 is character. We trust those that do what's right over what's easy. We have a framework for driving this into an organization. It's not something people think you have character and you're done at 12 years old. It's not true. But character is not everything. Number 4 is competency. This is why I might trust Thom to take my kids to the ball game, that character pillar, but not give me a root canal because of competency. And this is for
yeah, I'm going to jump in right there. You do not want me giving you a root canal. Do not trust me. Do not trust me for that.
That's right. And this is for all of you. Each of you, you need to keep getting better. If you're leading the way you were 20 years ago, I don't trust you. If you're selling the way you were 10 years ago, I don't trust you. If you're doing what you do the same way 5 years ago, I probably don't trust you, because you've got to stay fresh and relevant and capable and competent. And you'll notice each of these 8 pillars is denoted by the letter C, by a C word for clarity, but they kind of came out of different research funnels. It's not an 8 motivational words that start with C. It's a real framework. But the next C after competency is commitment. What did we learn? We trust those that stay committed even in the face of adversity. And you think of somebody that's made a difference in your life, your mom or first grade teacher or dad, or you think of in history, Mandela, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Jesus, or Joan of Arc. They were committed to something beyond themselves, and they were trusted for it. The next pillar is something you're an expert at, and that is the connection pillar. That we trust those that are willing to be connected and collaborative, connection and collaboration. So the opposite, we'll see counterforces in companies, and an opposite might be if I see siloing, and you can see for your folks that are trying to grow their careers and trying to be effective in your world, this digital space especially, we got to connect and collaborate. Next pillar is contribution. The number 1 word that kind of came out of this research funnel was results. We trust those that contribute results or perform or outcomes, contribution. is trust. You can't just have compassion character. You got to contribute results. Results matter. On the other hand, you can't just get results and not have compassion character. As you said before, that matters. So final pillar is consistency. We trust sameness. Whatever you do consistently, I trust. If you're late all the time, I will in fact trust you to be late next time. The only way to build a reputation, the only way to build a brand as an organization is consistency, sameness for good or bad. And so these 8 go together. You could even say it this way, that clarity pillar, we got a clear vision. Well, if you don't share it every 21 days and only at the annual meeting, you probably aren't clear because you lack consistency. And you can see many ways these work together.
So we only do a 25-minute podcast, so I can't go through all 8 of these pillars, but I'm just going to make some assumptions about my audience, and I'm going to pick a couple of them. And let's talk about what people can do to get better and grow their strengths around this area. So the first one I'm going to pick is connection, because we talk a lot about it on here. One of the number one things when we ask a lot of the people we interview how people can grow their careers, a lot of it has to do with that people quotient. It's their networking. It's the people inside their companies. It's how they relate to the people on their teams and beyond. So let's take a look at connection. What can people do to build better connections, to raise their score when it comes to trust?
2 things really quickly. Number 1, what is the most, there's a whole lot obviously under each of these, but 2 quick ones. 1, the most magnetic trait in individuals. Think about it, everybody in your mind. What do you think the most magnetic trait in first interaction is? Is it empathy? That's good. Is it a smile? There's some people that smile too much, I wonder.
The creepy. You don't want the creepy smile.
Right, exactly. Number 1 most magnetic trait in individuals in first interaction is actually gratitude. We trust those. We want to connect with people that are grateful. And if you can build this in your life, your way of being, your team, your family, almost all the negative traits go away, like entitlement and complaining and pessimism. So one idea would say, am I showing gratitude? Am I grateful to be here? Not like, I'm so grateful, I'm so thankful, not weird. I'm just saying a genuine gratitude is very, very connecting in an interaction, at a networking event, or wherever. That's 1. Number 2 is, remember, trust is more complex than we might think at first. As an example, people say transparency is trusted. Transparency is the thing of the day. And transparency is good, but some of your kids are so transparent on social media, I don't trust them for a second, because confidentiality is also trusted, right? However, this connection pillar, we know from the last research, 92% of people would trust their senior leader more if they were more transparent about their mistakes. And that's true for everyone. So in an interaction, sometimes we think we connect quicker when we share how cool we are and I got this award and I'm really smart. We don't. We trust quicker when we're more transparent about our mistakes. Oh, I've had that happen. And this, once again, this has to be done with wisdom. You don't just throw all your dirty laundry out there in first interaction, but this willingness to be a little open, appropriately vulnerable. And that in first interaction, this gratitude, and not general, as far as transparency, maybe not first interaction, but as you go deeper, being willing to share who you really are and some of your challenges actually goes a long way toward building connection, trust.
That leads me to sort of the second pillar I want to touch on, and that one is competency. Because the people listening to the show, they work in highly technical jobs. A lot is expected of them. There's a lot of moving parts for them and the teams that they work on that impact billion-dollar companies in many cases. So why does competency matter, and how do you show it other than going, hey, look at me, I'm really good at what I do?
Yeah, exactly. A really good one. So I'll tell you what we've seen in companies, like this, and I work with CTOs of some of the biggest companies, CIOs, also some of the biggest companies in the world. And one thing we find is the people listening today, you are brilliant at your technology, at your building these pathways and all this kind of thing. And that's good. You have to stay fresh and relevant and capable there. I would push you a little bit to keep as much of your learning and development on leadership and emotional intelligence and trust building intelligence, because that's going to help you stand apart. So here's an example. Well, in fact, we found this in the data that people want to put development toward personal and leadership development 3-to-1 over technical development. They want that, but they don't always do it. So keep developing yourself as a human, because that's going to be valuable everywhere, as a leader, as a connector. And so one way to do it, interestingly today, think about the number of people that actually read books still. And books are thought out. A lot of times one leader said that not only are leaders readers, but you're going to be the same in 5 years as you are today, except for the books you read and the people you're around, right? And yet people spend a lot of their time on floofy digital. Like, in fact, the average number of hours an American watches...
Which, by the way, isn't listening to this podcast.
Exactly.
No floofy on this podcast. But yes,
it's
I know
not
what you're
emails.
saying.
It's not that kind of thing, but just watching cat videos or whatever, right? Average is 1,287 hours annually, okay?
Say that again. How many hours?
1,287.
That's a lot of hours watching cat videos.
Exactly. And whatever, just stuff that doesn't make you better. And yet the average number of books an American reads in their lifetime after their formal education is in their lifetime. Whether that ended at a PhD or a high school degree, average number of hours, average number of books an American, you're going to be blown away. One over 200 pages. So Goodnight Moon doesn't count for the parents. But what does that mean?
That's an interesting average, because I read about 10. I used to read about 25. I read about 10 books a year, which means means there's 10 people not reading any.
Exactly, and more. My brother reads one a week, 52 books a year. So most people are reading none. So what I would push each of you to do, not just because I'm an author, as you can imagine, it's a bad time to be an author, but is I would push you to read something. Read something. Maybe it's out of your, maybe it's, if you don't know where to start, biographies you can learn from, development books you can learn from, something different than you're used to you can learn from. But I would just push you to just to read a little, just start to read, because we see people change. I had a guy come up to me. He said, he was a gray-haired guy. He'd been at my event in January. He came back and saw something 10 months later. He said, I was that guy you talked about. I haven't read a book since high school, if I read one then. And in the last 10 months, I've read, I think he said 36 books, and it changed my life even at this age. So just keep on learning.
Wow, I love that, and that is such an aspirational thing, to just read more books. I think that's great advice. Which leads me now to my favorite, really, of all the pillars, and that is contribution. Because I'm a results guy. We can talk about stuff all day long, but you got to get stuff done. But why does contribution contribute to your trust factor and how people see you?
This is the work of work. So, for you, I think of it this. I'm going in for amputation. And the surgeon, they're sweet, they're kind, they're compassionate, but cuts off the wrong leg. We got a problem. You can have these other pillars, compassion and character in a way, but if you don't get the results I expect or ask for, we got a problem. So the other problem, though, is I see some teams get incredible results, but they lack compassion and character, and they never get the opportunity to get those results again, because they don't combine the pillars together. You really need all 8 to gain this advantage we call the trust edge, or really be a trusted leader. And that's what the book's about. And the last habit gives these takeaways you can use tomorrow morning to be a more trusted leader right away under this 8-pillar framework.
So the last one I'll touch on for this interview is commitment. So I think when someone's in a job, if they really want to climb that career ladder, I think their peers, their bosses, their direct reports, people want to be around people who are all in. Burn the boats, be committed, let's raise this whole ship up. How can people do that?
There's nothing, like, here I am. I run a company. I run a team. And it means so much to me when people are committed. But just for each of us to know, commitment breeds commitment. When I'm more committed to them, they're more committed to me, and so forth. I can still remember this. You'll get a kick out of this, Thom. I was presenting to about 5,000 people at the Gaylord in Washington, D.C., and the new senior vice president of sales came up to me in the green room backstage, and he said, hey, before you go talk to my team, I read your first book, Trust Edge, and I love that chapter on commitment. Can you just go out there and tell my team to be committed to me? And he was serious. And I'm like, no, you've got to be committed to them first. And I watched this first-time senior vice president go out with inauthenticity and a lack of commitment, and I watched him lose his team that day in the way he showed a lack of commitment to them. So commitment breeds commitment. When you do it, you get the Harley Davidson story. When they changed everything at Harley and they showed commitment to their people, people started to tattoo and everything, right? And a dollar turned into 18,000 in the stock market. So that's the bottom line. I'll give you, we could talk all day about this. I'll give you one more tip, okay? Under this pillar. How do you rebuild trust? I'm asked all the time, how do you rebuild, because we all make mistakes. I do, you do, right?
Yes. No, I make lots of them.
Yeah, me too. So many people think, and there's a 10-step process of your big company that had an oil spill, and we talked through that. But whether you're a big company or an individual, it comes down to one thing. And it's not always what people think. They think, oh, I'm just apologize. You never, ever rebuild trust on the apology. This doesn't mean you don't need to start with an apology to open the door of communication, but the only way to rebuild trust is to make and keep a new commitment. Think about this. You got someone who says, I'm sorry I'm late, but they say it every day. No, I'm sorry I'm late. No, I'm sorry I'm late. No, you're not sorry you're late. So we don't rebuild trust on the apology. It doesn't mean we don't need to start with one. I certainly do too. But the only way to actually have it rebuilt is when we apologize and we make and keep a new commitment.
So I'm thinking about people who are listening to this right now, who are nodding. They've written down the 8 pillars of trust. Where do they start?
Other than buying a book, Trusted Leader.
I'm sure that Trusted Leader is available on Amazon and everywhere you get books.
Trusted Leader by David Horsager? No, just to be clear. By the way, trustedleaderbook.com, and you get a bunch of free assets with it if you'd like. So there you go. But where would I start? I would list those 8 down, and I would think about them and think, okay, clarity, consistency, put these 8 pillars down. And then I would say, okay, what one of these am I doing well? Just underline that. You're doing some of these well. You're showing compassion here. You're doing, celebrate that. We're all imperfect. But I would take one of those pillars and think, with some audience that I'm having trouble with, my audience of my 17-year-old kid, my audience of my clients, my audience of my spouse, my audience of whoever it is. You think, what pillar do I think, if I did a little more under that pillar, would help build that pillar with that person? I'd circle that pillar. You can't do it with every audience, but just to pick one at a time, and then just think, okay, starting today or tomorrow, how could I start to build that pillar of consistency with my employer? How could I build clarity with my 17-year-old? How could I, whatever. And what we say is how that until you can get to something you can do today or tomorrow.
So I was going to let you go, but you brought up how. And this is something that you teach. And I know to explain this, in a module in one of your workshops can take an hour or two. But in, just a couple of minutes, the framework is so simple that it almost is silly. And yet I use it in my own business now. And I just take myself through sometimes 6 or 7 times of asking myself how, and then I get that baby step that leads to the next step that leads to the next. So it's sort of just reverse engineering the big problem. But can you explain how?
How is the most overlooked, underused word that actually takes an idea to an action. That's the most underused strategic word. Lots of people talk about the why, and that's a good one. Lots of people talk about the who's on the bus, but the how is actually, and you have to ask it over and over and over. I've had people, by the way, take this little strategy. I'll teach it in 2 minutes, but I've had people say it tripled their sales in 90 days. I've had a big, huge company say this was the tipping point 7 years ago for us when you led us through that exercise, that everybody would know that company. So take it like this. So I said, let's take a company. I say, hey, what do you want? What do you need here? We need a better culture. Are they going to do anything? No. Okay, how are you going to do that? We're going to be more nice. Do I trust them? No. How are you going to be more nice? We're going to appreciate people more. How are you going to appreciate people more? See, with that thing, you just keep drilling down, not trying to get more hows widthwise, laterally, but down. So, okay, how are you going to appreciate people more? I'm going to write notes. Okay, how are you going to write notes? Until someone tells me I'm going to write a note every day for the next 90 days, I don't trust them. So that final how includes a who, when, and where. So even for me, when I was losing the weight, how am I going to take in less calories? I'm going to drink less. How am I going to drink less? When I get on the plane, instead of ordering a Coke, I'm going to order a Fresca, which has no calories. Okay, boom, I got to something I can do today or tomorrow. Okay, I'm going to sell more. How am I going to do that? I'm going to call more people. How am I going to do that? I got to get a list. How am I going to do that? I'm going to, people say they're going to call more people tomorrow. I don't trust them because they don't even have the list, right? So you got to get something you're going to do today or tomorrow. That's drilling the how down until you can apply it today or tomorrow.
And people can do this in their individual career. Someone who is looking at how do I climb the career ladder, they can start with, I want to climb the career ladder. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, I probably should let my superiors know that I'm, going to work hard and look for a promotion. Well, how are you going to let them do that? Well, I could wait for my next review, but I think what I'll do is schedule time with my boss. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, I'm going to talk to their, assistant or whatever. And you just keep drilling it down till you get to those steps where you can climb that ladder back up. And it's so simple and it totally works.
Yep, absolutely. It's the truth.
Awesome. Well, David Horsager from the Trust Edge Institute and author of Trusted Leader, thank you for being a guest on the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Any last words of advice for the people listening?
Hey, for those of you, in this career development, I would say this, under that consistency pillar, it is the little things done consistently that make the big difference. The little things done consistently that are most trusted. That would be one final quote. Thom, thanks for letting me be here today. I'm just grateful for you and all the great work you're doing.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. Please join us every single week for more thoughts, ideas, and information in and around product lifecycle management. Hey, the Digital Enterprise Society, it is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Go check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.